Before you begin, take a deep breath. This isn't just a story, it's a remembering. If these words find their way into your hands, it's not by accident. Something inside you called them in, maybe softly, maybe in a whisper, but it was heard. What follows isn't a teaching, it's a resonance, one that might just awaken something ancient within you. Part 1. The Echo Beneath the Silence. If you've ever stared into the night sky and felt a longing you couldn't explain, if you've ever looked around the world and sensed that something was off, not in the external, but in the invisible fabric between moments, then perhaps, just perhaps, you're already awakening. Not in the dramatic sense of enlightenment or sudden cosmic visions, but a quieter unraveling, like a thread slowly pulling at the seams of what you once believed was reality. Because there comes a time, a sacred shift, when the noise of the world becomes unbearable, not because it's too loud, but because it no longer matches the rhythm of your soul. And in that stillness, you begin to hear, not with ears, but with essence. You hear something that isn't said, an echo beneath the silence, a signal from beyond this veil of flesh and form. That echo is the beginning, not of a journey forward, but a spiral inward. A remembering that the world is not as solid, not as fixed, not as real as it pretends to be. Part 2. The Hidden Pulse of All Things. There is a reason why, throughout history, the wise have spoken in riddles, why the ancients carved truths into stone rather than pages, why silence is more sacred than noise, because what is real cannot be taught, it can only be felt. And feeling requires a different kind of listening, beyond logic, beyond learning. You see, the world you touch, the people you meet, the thoughts you think, are not as solid as you imagine. They're frequencies, arrangements of vibration that your senses interpret as form, sound, color, story. But underneath it all, beneath the name of every object, the label of every emotion, there is a pulse, a rhythm, a wave. And the moment you start sensing that rhythm, you realize everything vibrates, everything. The chair beneath you, the memory from yesterday, the plan for tomorrow, the cell in your hand and the star in the sky. Vibration is the mother of matter. Nothing stands still. Even the stillness is in motion, just too subtle for most to notice. And once you realize this, the question changes. It's no longer, how do I change the world? It becomes, what am I vibrating right now? Because it is not your wishes that shape reality. It is your frequency. You can chant 1,000 mantras, write down 100 goals, pray with all your heart. But if your vibration is fear, doubt, or lack, then that is the seed you are watering. The field doesn't respond to language. It responds to coherence. Vibration speaks louder than intention. Part 3. The Mirror That Speaks in Silence. What if the universe was never judging you? What if it never punished, never rewarded, but only reflected? Imagine standing in front of a perfect mirror, one that doesn't distort, doesn't lie, doesn't flatter, just reflects. That mirror is your life. Every moment, every emotion, every pattern you repeat is a response to what you are vibrating. The universe isn't listening to what you say. It's not reading your vision board. It's not impressed by how badly you want something. It's tuning into what you radiate when you're not trying. That's the message it responds to. That's the signal that shapes what returns to you. So when love feels distant, it's not because you're undeserving. It's because you're still vibrating abandonment. When abundance escapes you, it's not that the universe is cruel. It's that you're still tuned to lack. You don't get what you want. You get what you are. And that is not a punishment. It's an invitation to become the frequency of what you desire, to become love, to become peace, to become expansion. But to do that, you must first see what you're actually sending out. And that's the hardest part, because most of us have learned to lie to ourselves better than anyone else could. We think we're hopeful while vibrating fear. We think we're empowered while vibrating victimhood. The mirror shows us the truth, and often we look away. But if you dare to look again, not with shame, not with blame, but with presence, then you begin the real alchemy. You begin the subtle, sacred art of shifting frequencies, not through force, but through awareness. Awareness is the fire. It melts denial, it purifies distortion, and in its glow you start to reclaim your power, not by controlling life, but by attuning to its rhythm. Because once your field changes, everything else follows. Not instantly, not dramatically, but undeniably. Part 4. Emotion is the spell that shapes the field. You've probably heard it before. Your thoughts create your reality. But that's not the whole truth. Thoughts are seeds, yes, but it's your emotions that water them. Your feelings are the frequency carriers. They don't lie. You can repeat 100 affirmations, script your dream life in a journal, even smile through your tears, but the field will always respond to what you truly feel beneath it all. Because vibration is not born from words. It is born from the fusion of emotion and energy. And the most magnetic energy you hold is what you feel in your body when no one is watching. That is your real broadcast. That is your spell. Emotion is the code the universe reads with precision. And unlike thoughts, which flicker and wander, emotions root themselves in your nervous system. They live in your breath, your heartbeat, the tension in your shoulders, the fire in your gut. You might say you're confident, but if your body tightens every time you speak your truth, you're vibrating fear. You might say you're abundant, but if your stomach knots when you pay a bill, you're vibrating scarcity. The mind can lie. The body never does. So here's the real work. Feel what you feel, without running, without judging, and then choose what you want to keep feeding. Because while you can't control every emotion that rises, you can choose which ones get to stay. You can choose which ones become rituals, and those rituals become your vibration. Want to change your field? Don't start with the outside. Start with how you feel when you're alone. Start with how you breathe when no one is asking you to be strong. Start with how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake. Those micro emotions shape your frequency more than any goal, any vision board, any manifestation video you've ever seen. And they are always speaking, even when you're silent, especially when you're silent. That's why presence is so powerful. Because when you become conscious of what you're feeling, you become the alchemist. You transmute pain into wisdom. You shift fear into clarity. You turn grief into gratitude. Not by pretending, not by suppressing, but by honoring the emotion, then guiding it home. This is sacred emotional hygiene. This is how you clean the vibrational field. And it doesn't require hours of meditation or spiritual perfection. Sometimes it just requires sitting with your sadness like an old friend, or holding space for your anger without unleashing it on the world, or breathing with your fear until it softens into courage. The more you do this, the more your body becomes a safe place. And when your body feels safe, your vibration stabilizes. When your vibration stabilizes, your field aligns. And when your field aligns, life doesn't just happen to you, it responds to you. That is the path of emotional mastery. And it begins with one honest question: what am I really feeling right now? Part 5. The sacred fire that burns without smoke. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when everything begins to collapse. Not because you failed, not because the universe is against you, but because the version of you that once fit this reality can no longer survive in the vibration you're stepping into. The job ends, the relationship dissolves, the old identity crumbles. You don't recognize your life anymore, and in truth, you're not supposed to. This is the fire, the sacred one, the one that doesn't burn houses but illusions, the one that doesn't destroy you but the layers that were never really you to begin with. It arrives uninvited, it doesn't knock, it erupts, and its purpose is not to harm but to purify. You feel it as restlessness, as grief, as a strange heat under your skin, a subtle burning that doesn't leave scars but melts away everything false. This is the ancient alchemy, not of metals but of soul, the process the mystics called solve et coagula. Dissolve so you may reorganize, burn so you may awaken, let go so you may become. But here's the truth. Most run from the fire. They try to numb it, silence it, avoid its message, because the fire doesn't comfort. It confronts. And the confrontation is always with the self. You're not facing the world. You're facing the mask you've worn for decades. You're facing the lies you've told to be loved. The compromises you've made to feel safe. The parts you silence to fit in. And when the fire arrives, all of it surfaces. Not to punish, but to be transmuted. Because beneath every scar is a locked power, and the fire knows where to find it. So it burns, not with violence, but with precision. Like a sculptor melting away the excess so the true form can emerge. That's why the pain often feels sacred. Not holy in the religious sense, but in the raw, undeniable way something inside you says, this isn't the end. This is the threshold. You're not breaking. you're breaking open. And what spills out is not weakness, but light. But to reach that light, you must stand still in the heat. You must allow the burn to do its work. You must stop trying to put the pieces back together and instead let them fall. Only then can the new structure form, not built on fear, but on truth. Not a repeat of the old, but the birth of the essential. This is not destruction. This is the ignition of soul. And you are not dying. You are being reforged. Part 6. Remembering the earth as a living being. Most people walk on the earth as if it were dead, as if it were a rock beneath their feet instead of a body beneath their soul. We build over her, extract from her, pollute her breath, all while forgetting she is not an object but a presence, a living intelligence, a mother. And just like any mother, she still gives, even when we forget how to receive. But for those who remember, who slow down long enough to feel, the earth becomes more than ground. She becomes a guide, a mirror, a rhythm we forgot we once danced to. You see, the ancients didn't worship the earth out of superstition. They honored her because they could feel her pulse in their own bodies. They knew that the cycles of nature weren't separate from their own transformation, that every phase of the moon echoed a shift in the heart, that every season mirrored a death and rebirth inside. And now, even as our cities rise and wires wrap around our attention, the earth still sings, still pulses, still invites us back. The soil still hums with memory. The wind still whispers codes. The rivers still carry the emotions we refuse to feel. But to hear them, we must be quiet. We must remove the armor of urgency. We must stop walking as machines and begin moving as remembering souls. Because when you stand barefoot on the ground, something ancient awakens. Your heart slows, your breath deepens, your cells remember. And that's not magic, it's physics. The earth has an electromagnetic field, so do you. And when they meet, barefoot, breathful, present, something aligns, something recalibrates. You stop vibrating against life and begin vibrating with it. That's why the forest heals, why the ocean calms, why the desert strips you down to your essence. Nature doesn't fix you, it reveals you. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were just out of tune. And when you walk with the earth, not on her but with her, your field begins to find rhythm again. Your body remembers its own medicine. Your thoughts slow down to the pace of roots. Your emotions soften into waves instead of storms. You begin to feel a deep exhale in your bones, not because your problems vanish, but because you're no longer facing them alone. The earth holds you, sings to you, rearranges you. And as your vibration recalibrates, your vision shifts. You see patterns you never noticed. You feel support in places you thought were empty. You realize that the same intelligence that blooms a flower without asking for permission also beats your heart. And that step is when your life begins to realign. Not because you pushed, but because you finally remembered. You were always part of the pulse. Part 7. The silence that remembers you. There is a silence that isn't empty. A silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something older than words. You may have touched it, between the inhale and the exhale, between one thought ending and another not yet formed. In that space, something watches, something remembers. Not the mind, not the body, but you, the real you. The one who existed before you had a name. The one who doesn't need to manifest, attract, or prove. The one who simply is. This silence doesn't require understanding. It asks for trust. It doesn't shout, it waits. And when you meet it, when you stop running long enough to sit within it, it begins to speak. Not in sentences, but in sensation. Not in logic, but in light. You begin to remember not facts, but frequencies. You remember the feeling of being whole. You remember what it's like to belong, not to a place or a person, but to the pulse of existence itself. And with that memory comes peace. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of presence. Where nothing needs to change for everything to be okay. Where your value isn't earned, it just is. This step is the quiet revolution. The inner reordering that doesn't demand applause, that doesn't chase results, that simply sits until your vibration is so aligned that life can't help but mirror it back. And from that space, the next step becomes obvious. You don't have to chase it. It comes. You don't have to force it. It unfolds. Because clarity is the natural result of inner resonance. And resonance begins in silence. So if you've been searching, trying, pushing, pause. Not because you're giving up, but because you're tuning in. Let the silence hold you. Let it melt the noise. Let it remind you, you are not here to become someone. You are here to remember who you already are. Part 8. Living as a frequency. What happens when silence becomes your teacher? When instead of reacting, you respond. When instead of chasing, you attract. When instead of trying to become, you begin to embody. Something subtle but irreversible begins to shift. Your life stops being a sequence of tasks and starts becoming a transmission. You walk differently. You breathe differently. You listen without interrupting, speak without needing to be right. You begin to live less from habit, more from harmony. That's when you realize the real transformation is not in what changes outside, it's in how you show up. Because your presence becomes medicine. Your energy becomes instruction. You don't teach people with your words. You activate them with your coherence. This is the new way of being. Not the loudest, not the fastest, but the clearest. Where your vibration does the work before your actions even begin. And suddenly, the things you used to force now come with flow. The opportunities you once begged for now come to match your resonance. The relationships you once strained to fix now reorganize naturally, or fade if they no longer serve your highest alignment. This isn't magic. This is vibrational intelligence. It's the physics of alignment, the science of being true. Because when you're true, your frequency sharpens, your boundaries soften, your intuition strengthens, and people feel it. Even if they can't explain it, they feel safer around you. They trust your silence more than others' advice. Not because you have the answers, but because you've become a clear field, and in your clarity, they remember their own. So your life becomes less about doing more and more about being more true, more present, more embodied. You might still work the same job, speak the same language, live in the same city, but your vibration makes the difference. You shift the room by walking into it. You break patterns by refusing to engage them. You heal by listening without fixing. You lead by standing still while others rush. This is the quiet power, the invisible architecture of the awakened field. And once you taste it, you stop chasing the world, because you've realized you are it. Part 9. The door has opened. Will you walk through it? You've made it this far not because you followed steps, but because something ancient inside you stirred. You didn't read, you remembered. You didn't learn, you realigned. And now something inside you hums differently. A frequency has shifted. The world hasn't changed, but the way it reflects you has. This is not the end of the journey. It is the first breath of conscious living. The first moment you stop reaching outside and start vibrating from within. And now comes the only question that matters. Will you walk differently? Will you speak from your truth even when your voice trembles? Will you hold your frequency even when the world forgets its own? Will you let presence replace performance and peace replace proving? Because the work is no longer about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the clarity you had before the noise. To the calm you knew before the chaos. To the love you felt before the world taught you to fear it. And from that space, every step becomes sacred. Every word becomes a spell. Every breath becomes a prayer. Not to some distant God, but to the living intelligence within your own being. You are the temple. You are the altar. You are the field. And now you know how to tend it. So the invitation is simple. Live as vibration. Move as harmony. Speak as frequency. Choose as presence. Create as remembrance. And when life tests you, as it will, return to the silence. Return to the fire. Return to the breath, to the earth, to the clarity. Because you are not here to escape the world. You are here to change its rhythm by changing your own. And that begins not tomorrow, not later, not when you are ready, but now. With the next breath, with the next thought, with the next word you speak and the energy it carries. You've remembered. The question now is, what will you do with that memory?